Well, great. Thank you. Okay. Um, well, my name's Patty Wagner. I'm an occupational therapist at the Big Blue Canopy, where we provide OT, PT, and speech therapy services. And we also have groups starting this summer. So if anyone's interested in that, feel free to go online and look us up. So anyways, I just appreciate you guys having me here tonight. And I was asked to talk about oral fixation and other oral challenges in the pediatric population. So when I was beginning this PowerPoint presentation, what I did was I took the questions that you guys submitted and I designed it around that. So I hope it's helpful for you. So whenever you're talking about oral challenges, I think it's really important to understand the oral motor development and sensory sequences. So, because if there's any kind of challenge or breakdown in that area, it can result in like compensatory strategies or sensory issues or behavioral patterns or food refusal and that kind of thing. And so there's a lot of different factors that can influence the oral phase. Things like when we look at muscle tone, when we look at metabolic issues or prematurity, or if the child has respiration difficulties, cardiac issues, or if they have reflux, that will all impact and are crucial when we assess and develop that plan of treatment. So let's kind of look at that developmental sequence. These are just a few things that I put in, but I wanted to kind of show you how important it is and how that child kind of develops and integrates to move along that continuum, and why, if there's a challenge or breakdown at any of those levels, then it can result in difficulty with that whole oral phase. So when these kids are newborns, their first job is to really to self-regulate for feeding. They're very hardwired. They have these synergistic patterns and reflexes. So they have that rooting reflex, the suck swallow reflex, the gag reflex, and that helps them for their job to take in that nutrition. When the child starts to develop, 4 to 6 months, they're starting to come out of that real tight physiological flexion. And those oral motor skills are becoming more active and volitional rather than synergistic and reflexive. So, you know, they have kind of more of a munch chew pattern at 4 to 6 months that replaces kind of that phasic bite pattern. And then when you talk about the kids at 4 to 6, you talk about that spoon feeding is usually introduced around that time, around 6 months, and that gag reflex starts to move further back. So going on to 7 to 9 months. So these kiddos are getting, becoming more integrated. They're having more active lip movements to clear like pureed from a spoon. They have kind of a rhythmic bite or munch chew that can be observed. And sometimes, you know, if you give a kid at this developmental level, like a meltable, like a puff or that kind of thing, they can do that. 10 to 12 months. So this is an important period because this is where their introduction usually of solid foods occurs. And they'll have that rotary chew pattern is starting to develop. And they're starting to now have a baseline to handle a more variety of those food textures. And they're getting more active with that lip cheek movements with their chewing pattern. And they're improving in their lip closure for swallowing liquids. moving on to 13 to 15 months. So they're getting more jaw stability for biting things. They're developing more of that jaw and that lip and that tongue isolated control or disassociation. They might have some more lip closure during chewing, and they're maintaining a more continuous suck with the cup drinking. So, and they're also, that tongue tip, they're getting kind of that thinning of that tongue. The lateral borders are moving over to get that food, to bring it back, that kind of thing. So a lot of important thing is going on. 16 to 18 months, getting more internal jaw stability, getting more disassociation with the jaw, lip, and tongues. They're getting a more controlled bite, and improved integration. And this is usually when toddlers are eating family food items. 19 to 24 months. So rotary chewing pattern can be observed with most food textures, and they have that tongue retraction for swallowing liquid. So they're now 19 to 24, chewing meats completely. They're using a straw and sucking with longer sequences. 24 to 36 months. So this is when you should see that child having a quote unquote kind of adult-like pattern. And they continue to improve in that strength and stability. And they have less tongue thrusting to support the swallowing is totally resolved. You won't see that. So now let's go back to think about what are some of the things that our kids get stuck in regarding this area. So one of the questions that was submitted was about, whoops, I'm sorry, pardon me. One of the questions that was submitted was about food pocketing and stuffing. And, you guys know what that is. It's just basically when the kiddos hold the food in their mouth for an extended period of time. So when we look at development of food pocketing, now this is food stuffing is really a phase that most babies go through. And the reason why they go through this developmentally, like we looked at that before, is that they're learning how to manage the food in their mouth and where the things are in their mouth. And we all are creating, like, as these babies start developing, that we're creating this body map. And you might have heard of this word, it's the homunculus. It's kind of like knowing where our body is, and it kind of gives us our map in our brain of kind of where our body is. So when we look at that oral phase, we can't see inside our mouth, but we get a lot of our receptors from the tactile sensation and also the proprioception, that's the pressure and that kind of thing. We get a lot of feedback of where things are in our mouth. And that kind of helps then as we start to develop and grow, that creates that body mapping in our brain, okay? And so, like I said before, as they refine and they advance in these skills, they learn to motor plan. That is key for them for the pre-language and language skills and the feeding skills.
Patty, can I just ask one question? Sorry, but
sure.
Does this, like what you're talking about, correlate to older children or teens and adults? I just want to make sure, because I know some of the families have older kids as well.
Yes, because if you have in their development, if they get, and this could be a kid that could be 5, 10, 15, even an adult, you know what I mean? If they have challenges or get stuck in a certain area developmentally from a sensory or motor standpoint, that could make it difficult for them in the oral region. Okay, did that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
So yes, all ages, and when I was talking about development, I was talking about like when you look at from birth up until, up until 2, I was just talking about this is kind of the developmental sequence. But I've seen lots of kids at different ages that could have challenges. And I have to kind of go back and say, okay, maybe they're 5 or they're 10 or whatever. Where are the challenges, and where are they kind of getting stuck, and what is the underlying thing that's getting in the way of why they're doing what they're doing? Did I
Got it.
clarify that for you?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Feel free. Okay. So now let's get back to that question. So what are reasons that these kiddos might be pocketing their food? And again, that could be a kid 3 or 6 or 10 or whatever. Maybe it's because of sensory processing challenges. And what is sensory processing? Basically, that is, our ability to take in information from our internal environment and the world around us, organize that information, and use it in an adapted response. So I can sit here and I can sit in the chair without falling out, answering your questions, looking at the screen. So there's a ton of things that are going on here, that I have to take cues from internally inside my body, outside, ignore the non-important things, and then be able to output an adaptive response. So it's quite complex when you think about it. And I think we take some of that for granted, but it's really fascinating. So when I look at that, I also look at sensory modulation challenges. So a kiddo can be sensory under responsivity, or sometimes that's referred to, you've heard as hypo, sometimes sensory over responsivity, and that's sometimes referred to as hyper, and then sensory seeking or craving. And modulation, let me just kind of define that. That is the ability to respond appropriately to the sensory environment and to remain at the appropriate level of arousal or alertness. So an example, like if I have a food in my mouth and I'm just like, I am real like, oh, I don't like that. It might be that I'm very sensitive to that. And I'm kind of, my level of arousal just kind of shot up, that kind of thing. So, but what I want to do is kind of look at that in detail, because some of our kiddos can have challenges in these areas that then affect them. And you see that in functional daily tasks and that kind of thing. So from the oral standpoint, let's look at sensory under responsivity, okay? So these are the kiddos, this is under, may display, passive or disregard kind of input in the mouth or on the mouth, or, responding to sensory input at an age-appropriate intensity. And they're under responsivity to tactile and deep pressure may then lead to like poor body awareness, or kind of be kind of awkward or not very coordinated in their oral motor movements. They may lack kind of graded oral motor control. And they might also have trouble with interoception awareness. Now, I don't know if a lot of people have heard this word, but interoception is also part of your sensory systems. But that's that feedback that you get from internal cues in your body. And it's also related to emotions. Emotions are related to everything we do. An example of this is maybe I'm just putting food in my mouth, and I never get those internal cues that I'm actually full. Or it could be the opposite, where I'm not eating at all because I'm not getting those cues of, oh, wow, I'm really hungry, I need to eat. So that's an example of interoception. Sensory over responsivity in the oral phase. So those are the kiddos that may display a real strong aversion to inputs such as smell, taste, and textures. Okay. And you see the picture here of the little girl, like, no way, you're not getting that in my mouth. So that's an example of that. And then the kiddos that are sensory seeking or craving in the oral phase, these tend to be the kiddos that I see behaviors such as they may inappropriately just mouth everything. The clothes or the toys or furniture, and this is way after the age of when it's appropriate to mouth things. They may eat excessive amounts of foods or have difficulty feeling full, like we talked about again, that interoception can play a part into this too. Or they may stuff their mouths and choose maybe high taste foods because they want that intensity. So those are some examples. So the other thing I look at is kiddos that have sensory discrimination disorders, okay? So this is a kiddo, let me give you an example of discrimination, like from the hearing standpoint, okay? I hear something and then I go, oh, that's a doorbell, because I've discriminated against what it is. Or I see something and I go, oh, that's a dog. From the oral standpoint, it could be like there's something in my mouth and then I'm tasting it and I go, oh, that's a Cheerio or whatever. But some of my kiddos have trouble with discriminating that. They might be unaware that the food, there's like residuals in their food. You might still see that after they swallowed. Or they may swallow a bolus that is too large or chew it for long periods of time. Or they have difficulty in identifying the food or even where is that in my mouth. Or they might be very messy eaters or just food all over and even unaware of it, not getting that tactile cues and that kind of thing. Sometimes these kiddos, like they will drool and they're not even aware of it. I'm like, oh, right there. And they're like, oh, but they don't get that tactile feedback. You can also see kiddos that have challenges with motor-based disorders, okay? An example of this is like motor planning or praxis. That can significantly impact the oral motor development of a child or a teen or an adult. And we talked before, that's why it's so important to understand, from my standpoint as a therapist, that those developmental sequences, because you can and really appreciate like how hard is that to, have a spoon, clear that whatever pureed off the spoon, bring it back and swallow it, or chew that cookie, form a bolus, bring it back here, chew it, masticate it, bring it back here, form a bolus, and then swallow it appropriately. So there's a lot that goes into it. And I can see children and teens and adults that, they might have difficulty with motor planning and hypersensitivity. So it's not just the sensory system. You can have some systems that can be totally that they're doing well in, and other systems that they have challenges in, or there could be multiple things going on there that they're not registering or discriminating, and then they're also hypersensitive. And then another system, they could be hyposensitive. So you have to look at all those kind of things because nothing is done in isolation. And so when I look at, I know today we're talking about the whole oral phase and some behaviors that you might see, but nothing is in isolation. I have to look at the whole picture and and with the family and problem solve that to really get a plan that best meets that individual's needs. So again, possible reasons for pocketing food. So what if the child's not able to fully feel what's going on in their mouth, or the teen? They may need to pocket that food or stuff it in order to feel that food. Other reasons that you might see kids or teens or adults do this is that they like the way it feels. It just feels good. You know, if you put a lot of food in your mouth, you're going to get a lot of pressure, a lot of tactile probe, and that might be very soothing and comforting for that individual. Other reasons, like we talked about before, is that they might have some praxis limitations, and that's why they pocket. I mean, think about how scary that would be if someone put something in your mouth and you didn't even know how to orally manage that. That would be very scary, and you better believe they're going to do a fight or flight because they need to protect themselves, and that doesn't feel right to them, and they are going to react. So I'm always very, very respectful and looking for those cues, regardless if they're verbal or nonverbal. I watch that. How do you react? Is that body stress? Where are they? What are their individual differences? What are their kind of sensory motor challenges? And respecting that and taking a look at that. Okay. And then I also kind of put this in just because I wanted to share this just during meal times, and I'm sure you've been told this a lot, just that providing good postural alignment and support is so key. I was at this one class and I thought it was really kind of neat. We took crackers and they made us just kind of lay back in our chair, and our head wasn't in a good alignment and our body was kind of back, and they just had us eat crackers. And they said, just feel how hard that is to move that back and eat. And it really kind of stayed with me of how important it is. I mean, I know as a therapist how important good alignment is, but it was just so key. And I thought that was, sometime try that and see that. Okay, so other reasons why they might be pocketing their food. Well, maybe it's just painful or uncomfortable to swallow. Some of those individuals that have reflux or swollen tonsils or adenoids or other medical conditions, or they might be doing this because it's become a learned or habit behavior. So these are just some general recommendations for decreasing food pocketing. But again, keeping in mind that every kid is different. So what works for one kid might not work for another kid or teen or adult. Some of the things that I've done when I've had these kiddos that have done a lot of this food pocketing have been like, I want to do pacing. So I want to slow down their pace of eating. Okay. I've done things with, I want you to take so many bites and then swallow. There was one little girl that we actually had like a little visual for her. And then she was like, bite, 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 and then, swallow. I've used some, you can see up here in the corner, some kind of fun little utensils or that kind of thing. Sometimes plates with dividers will slow them down. I also have put things in like smaller little containers, so they have to go in there. So it's not like, because I've had kids that just, you put the food in there and they just grab it and put it right in their mouth. And I'm like, oh. So I've used different kind of containers. I've also done teaching, like understanding the bite size. Okay, we're gonna eat this like a little mouse, so small mouse sizes, and then maybe, regular is whatever, dog sizes or whatever your kid's into. And then now we're going to go giant dinosaur sizes. So I'm helping them to understand kind of that the different sizes. And just watch out for mindlessness eating. We all do this, like when we were watching the Super Bowl and, hoping the Bengals won here. And we were just shoving the food in because we were so nervous, and just watch out for that mindless kind of food stuffing. So I also wanted to touch base on pica, because somebody had submitted a question of when does this become a serious problem like pica versus just a sensory issue. So what I did is I actually went into the DSM-5 list because I wanted to be very clear on this when I was discussing it. So a person diagnosed with pica will repeatedly eat non-food items, even if that makes them sick, okay? If that's the case and your kid is just putting all sorts of items into their mouth, talk that over with your doctor, because your doctor might want to then do some more testing, some blood work, just, to see if there's any nutrient deficiency, or making sure they don't have anything obstructing or anything that could be dangerous for that child's health and well-being. But when it's said in the DSM-5, when the eating of non-nutritive, non-food substances is inappropriate to the developmental level of the individual. So if developmentally that individual is at that age where everything is going to the mouth, they're most likely not going to give that pica diagnosis. And there are some cultures that support, and it's very normative to eat non-food items. So I just wanted to say that. I did talk to my brother. My oldest brother is a pediatrician, and I said, with kids that are neurodiverse, how many, because I see quite a few kids that, are older and they're still putting items in their mouth and that kind of thing and eating non-food items. And I said, how many of those kids have you diagnosed with pica? And he said, none. So I think in the neurodiverse population, it's my feeling that, and we can talk about that some more in the Q&A, that they really don't give that. Now, not to say that I don't see kids that do that at a much older age, and we definitely work on that, but they don't usually give that diagnosis. So, but if a kid has pica, and I've had kids on my caseload with that, very few that got that diagnosis, that formal diagnosis. But even if they didn't have that diagnosis, as a therapist, what I'm going to do, and the parents, and we work together on this, is we're really going to alter kind of that environment to make sure that kid is as safe as possible. So what can I rearrange in that environment? I've had kids that, I have the toys out and we're working on certain things, and I kind of have to put it over a little, because if it's right there, they'll just grab it and it'll go right to the mouth. So, but I always want to consider, that emotional and behavioral or mental health and all that kind of thing too. So, but I try to, some ways is I try to kind of keep their hands busy, or give something in their hands, or reward them, praise or hugs or smiles when they do not engage in that pica behaviors. Sometimes I've used behavioral reward charts, but again, I try to, if everything's kind of going to the mouth, I try to kind of reinforce those positive behaviors you want, and that kind of thing. But always keep in mind the child's safety, of course. So another question that was submitted was on finger sucking and finger biting patterns. So that's when they mouth, mouthing objects is a necessary part of development for small children. And we do that. I mean, when we're nervous or anxious, I mean, we'll kind of bring that to our mouth and that kind of thing. So, I see that a lot. I see it with adults. But if it really extends beyond, their 4, 5 year, that kind of thing, I think parents a lot of times worry, that it can alter the teeth, and the teeth come in around 6 years of age, kind of thing. It also gets in the way of language development. I have a kiddo that I saw in the past that whenever she came into therapy, she'd run and she'd jump on the little platform swing, and instantly those fingers were in that mouth. With her, it was really kind of a self-soothing and kind of she did it, on a regular basis when her hands were busy or bored and that kind of thing. And that's why she did it, where another kid might do it for a whole other reason. So we'll look at that in more detail. So when I have a kiddo doing that, I want to, first look at, okay, when are they doing that action? Biting their nails or putting their fingers in their mouth or that kind of thing. And what occurs before, during it, and after. That'll give me more information. And what is kind of the caregiver's reaction to that? Okay. So they might be doing that because they're getting that oral stimulation that helps them cope, as I said before, like that little girl was doing, some of the stress or anxiety when they're feeling overwhelmed or that kind of thing, and they want that for soothing and comforting. There also might be a sensory component to that. It provides a lot of tactile and probe input for those seekers. Or are they able to register this input? Do they have a limitation in their interoception awareness? Does that help them to self-regulate? Or are they doing this because it's very behavioral in nature and it's part of kind of a habit? Okay. Or are they just bored or tired? So the treatment approach that I use is going to depend on the underlying issues. And then as a team, we create the individualized therapeutic approach. Okay. I really feel that mouthing should not just be discouraged, but we should put in a replacement coping mechanism. So some kids need to do that. Some individuals need to do that. So nail biting is another question. Provide a replacement behavior. Okay. Maybe that it's appropriate for that kid to have a chewy, or maybe we need to do a sensory diet plan that they have more of that's more appropriate, if you will, sensory input versus the nails. Because some of these kids, I've seen kids that chew their nails down all the way and it's bleeding and cutting, and that you worry about for infection and that kind of thing. So I, again, want to reinforce positive behaviors. Give them, this is hard, but give them things to do with their hands, a fidget. Some parents have tried like that bitter tasting products. I've done reward systems, fidgets, a worry stone. I've done things with kids. Some kids are nail biters or pickers or that kind of thing, where I put Velcro under their table at school so they could that Velcro is kind of like that, they can pick or, that kind of thing. That's worked. We've worked on what are the triggers if it's anxiety related, keeping those nails kind of trimmed and short. I had a little girl that when she worked on this and she's working really hard, then when her nails grew back, we got to decorate them, and that was very reinforcing to her. Also, some of these kids need, like I said before, a strong sensory diet. I mean, to up that because they're really seeking out that oral input. So those are the kiddos that musical instruments or blow toys, oral motor blow toys, or drinking from a sponge straw or water bottles. Or I've even kind of, what could we put in their lunchbox to give them more of that input that they need for their oral system, games or oral fidgets or all sorts of things. So I wanted to show you some visuals here, and I have a few slides on that. Let me bring out my laser here. So in therapy, depending on the kid's needs, you know, it might be a Tichui might be appropriate, and they have all different kinds. I have some kids that are really need that intense biting down, and there's some that are more for really heavy duty biters that need that input. But I have put together plans for parents if they need that input. There's Nook brushes and different things like that. Here's jewelry that they can wear, or these are called jigglers right here. They're real fun. And again, it's what's appropriate for that child developmentally or that teen developmentally. Things they could put on. I've had kids that have chewed on their pencils or their fingers, and so we put these kind of jewelry things on top of their pencils, so they do that. And then there's all different things that you can buy. That's an example of that. I also do, if a kiddo needs like oral motor things, or they need more intensity in that sensory area, different kind of oral motor blow toys and that kind of thing. You can see here a variety of games that we do with our teens and our kiddos, you know, spider races or blowing, whatever they're interested. I just really tap into that internal motivation, what interests them, to get what I need to get them advanced and in their oral motor skills and more awareness, more interest, more of their awareness of their body and their mouth and all that kind of thing. So this is a variety of different ways. This little girl, I've had families come in and go, you know, they can't even blow out their candles, or they can't even spit out toothpaste. That's oral motor and what's going on from a motor sensory standpoint. So that kind of thing. And in therapy, you know, we have a lot of different talk tool techniques and different things and Beckman exercises and just all that kind of thing that we do, that we work on that. If that kid needs better lip closure, or they need, you know, more jaw stability, or just to advance them with their oral motor skills. So we'll do a lot of that. Also, I have done things with kiddos that I've recommended, and teens, books, you know, and I just put a few here. This is kind of for an older kid and for younger kids. And I haven't used this, but this was just kind of what we talked about before, kind of a kit. I have, you know, some people have used like gloves or mittens, and there are some things commercially available you can get like on Amazon that you can put on the child's hand to avoid them putting the thing in the mouth all the time or biting. But to be honest, what I found is the kids just take it off. So maybe you guys have had better luck, but that's what I found with those kiddos. So, and I think the most important thing, let me take off this laser. The most important thing is that we are very attuned to that individual's needs. We make them feel safe and supported, and we respect that. And this is a quote that I absolutely love from Greenspan. And he puts, "There is no greater feeling than being understood." So I wanted to share that with you. So we've got to the Q&A. Whoop, yep, I went past it. So I thought, oh, we did good on time. We can open this up for discussion.
Okay, hold on. There was a question in the chat box and it says, would you consider licking as mouthing? And I think I noticed a bunch, other handful of people asking specifically about licking.
Yeah, you know what I wonder about that is that maybe they're licking because they're getting information about that, you know? And it gives them information. That's what I'm thinking. And they're getting a lot of kind of tactile input with that. That's what I'm wondering about.
Can I ask a question about that? Is that okay?
Ask anything you want.
Okay, so my son is 16 and he's been licking for years and years and years and years. And really what has morphed into, I believe, is attention seeking, because
Okay.
he'll do it, you know, he'll stick his tongue out, he'll put it on the table, let's say, and he'll look at me. And he'll just have it, I mean, he's not moving it, he's not exploring, he's just looking at me. And no matter what it is, I mean, it could be his aide's leg, it could be a notebook, it could be the computer, you know, whatever it is, it's avoidance, probably partially too from doing the work that he's being asked to do. And then the attention, and then he'll like take my hand and put it on his chin and bring it up. So, and this has been a very long time going. So I'm just, you know, we ignore it as best we can.
Okay.
But hearing your other talk, I do see a whole lot of deficits he may have as well, which I know, but it was kind of interesting to hear it condensed, like how you presented it. But his, it may have started out as exploring, but it's kind of, and he does have a very relaxed kind of posture with his mouth too, like that. If he's just, you know, sitting and not doing anything. Right now he looks like he just ate yogurt. So there's a lot of residual. I'm listening.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, cool. When I see kiddos like look at their parents or their caregivers for reaction, I go behavioral. That's what I kind of think in my mind. But there could also be some sensory component to that also, right? I could definitely see that there could be some sensory and that kind of thing. So I agree with you, Amy, that it's like, I try to ignore, I would try to ignore that as much as you can. And then you try to reinforce or positive praise when you get more of the behavior that you want, more of the positive behavior that you want. You know, that's pure behavioral approach and that kind of thing. Have they tried like upping him, like giving him a real strong sensory diet and see if maybe that behavior decreased? Just wondering.
So with other behaviors, we have tried that, but when you say a real big sensory diet when it comes to oral?
Yeah.
So do you mean using the fidgets or using the chew? Is that what you mean by additional?
More bang for your buck, like really intensifying that, either the food he eats, it depends, like, you know, can he tolerate those foods and that? So I have to be real careful in what I recommend, but.
He totally limits himself with what he eats. I mean, he really does. So he really eats the same things for every meal, just about, you know, so he himself does that. So we try to push, but you know, that's one thing. You can't make a kid sleep or eat or use the bathroom, right? Or whatever. But we try.
Yeah.
So I don't know if food would be the key for him. I think maybe, like you said, the other things. But
it could also be non-nutritive. Like, I definitely think you do what you do, you know, from the behavioral standpoint, that goes without saying. But I also wonder if we give non-nutritive oral things, like, you know, maybe if he likes that input with it. Does he have a chewy, or I'm sorry, what does he have?
He's never taken to one of those either, and he doesn't care to have his teeth brushed. He doesn't like things like that in his mouth at all. And it's like trying, he gets better, with practice with that, but he's very protective of himself that way. Does that make sense?
Oh, it makes perfect sense. Does it? I'm wondering if he has some oral hypersensitivity. So
I would say so.
He, does he tend to, I know you said lick things. Was he in a mouthing phase for a long time or not? Because sometimes kids will not like it when you come at them and they want it. But when you come at them, they're like, no. So they're like defensive. And it does sound like he's hypersensitive.
Yeah.
When you said teeth brushing, he doesn't like that. That makes me think, okay, we've got some defensiveness there.
Yeah, not necessarily. I wouldn't say that it was an overly extended time of that. No.
Okay.
I know he definitely, the control of his tongue, he still has the thrust sometimes when he eats.
Yeah.
That comes out. When he drinks, his tongue is on the outside of his bottom lip. And I've tried to correct it, but when a kid learns that he can do it and gets what he's wanting,
Can he move his tongue to side and lateralize? Can he chew things well?
He can chew things well, but he doesn't do it by, like, if I said, move your tongue here, he won't follow that direction. And I don't know if it's because he can't or he just doesn't process what I'm saying.
Yeah.
With that. Yeah. So maybe just more of those kinds of oral.
Yeah, it does sound like there's some motor kind of and sensory challenges and that kind of thing. But it sounds like he's also done very well. That's the beauty.
He accommodates.
Kids learn to accommodate and compensate, and they do very, very well.
He does. And it's funny though, because when you have this like behavioral thing, any of the internal things you don't work on as intensely as those outer things that are noticeable to other people. Like other people don't want him licking him, but whether or not he's chewing this, you know what I mean? So it's like, I guess I try to work on those external behaviors, but maybe then I miss out on the development of the internal behaviors, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. It does.
To get it socially acceptable for what he's doing.
But you're right. People don't want to have people lick them.
Right.
And so, and if I have a kid and that is a learned kind of behavior and they've, and then I'm like, okay, no, thank you. You can't do this, but you could then take this and do this with it. So I have to kind of have a replacement behavior. You know what I mean? Because it feels like this has been going on for a long time. You know what I mean? And so I'm kind of like, can I get that in less frequency? And then can I then advance him more for oral motor and all that kind of thing? So a lot of things come to mind when I'm hearing you talk.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does. It definitely does. I mean, I know he's got to work more on all of that. Like spitting, you mentioned that. He doesn't do that with his toothpaste. We just limit the amount so it's not too much. So he doesn't swallow a lot. And swishing, he doesn't quite get the swishing. He just
but think how hard that is from an oral motor standpoint. I mean, I have parents that come in and they go, he can't even blow his nose. And I'm like, that's motor planning. I mean, think how hard that is. I have to breathe in and then I have to hold here and then I have to close off my mouth. I mean, that's a complex thing. But then, the kids, when he's in school, he might have something running down his face. And how is that socially appropriate, to other people? It doesn't bother me. I wipe noses all day. I don't mind. But, just like you said, you don't want someone licking you. You don't want drool hanging. You know what I mean? And so those are the things I look at functionally, like, can we work on that a little bit more to then get them so it's, more functional or more independent and that kind of thing. But I give these kids credit. They're amazing how they learn to overcome and compensate. I mean, we all compensate for things. So I give them credit. Yeah. But you look at what's important to that family and that kid. And, you look at those individual differences and that kind of thing. And that's where you go, and those underlining things, and the functional things.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you for the info. There were some aha things that I think maybe I can get a school therapist to help out with too. So that'll be good.
Great. Thank you, Amy.
Anybody else have any questions? Yeah.
Pop up in the background.
I don't see any more in the chat box. I don't see anybody jumping out of their seat right now. Well, thank you, Patty. In this,
welcome.
obviously, we were able to record this. So I definitely will share with the families that had registered and weren't able to log on. So maybe that might generate some more questions. And if it's okay, I see your contact information's on here, that we could reach out. But thank you very much for your time and sharing with us.
Oh, absolutely. And I hope that was helpful. I really tried to take those questions and integrate it. But the more I delve into it, it's simple, but it's complex. So it was really kind of a learning experience for me too. I was like, oh, this won't be hard. And then I was like, oh, this is more complicated than I thought. But it's neat. But it's so much more, and there's so much that it entails. So I hope that was helpful. So
I think it definitely was. Well, I think that's all I see. So thank you so much for your time. And for everyone who's on, I will follow up, or we'll follow up sometime later this week or next week with the recording. So,
okay.
All right. Have a great evening.
Oh, thank you. You too.
Thanks,
Patty.
guys. Thanks, Maggie. See you later.
Thanks, Amy.